My girlfriend said I'd never get anyone better than her. Now she's a cashier at a store I own, and I make her manager give her the worst shifts. I'm a 26-year-old guy, and I used to think she was the one. Sarah and I had been together for almost 4 years. It felt like everything was falling into place. She was the perfect mix of charming, ambitious, and beautiful. I was proud of the life we were building together, and I genuinely believed we were meant to be. But somewhere along the way, things started changing, and I didn't realize how much I was slipping until it was too late. At first, Sarah's comments about my career seemed harmless. She'd joke about how I didn't have the same stability she did, since she worked a steady job at a well-known company, while I was still figuring things out, hustling to climb the ladder. But then, those little comments turned into something darker. "You should have been more ambitious by now," she'd say, or, "I just don't know if I can see a future with someone who can't even keep a job like mine." Her words. At first, it didn't sting as much because I knew she was just a little stressed or tired. But over time, I couldn't ignore the feeling that maybe I wasn't enough for her. There were times when we'd go out with friends and she'd drop little digs about how I wasn't as successful as I should be, or how she deserved more than this life we had. She'd talk about vacations we couldn't afford and complain about our small apartment, while I tried to remind her how lucky we were to have what we did. And then, one night as we were watching a movie, she said it. "You'll never get anyone better than me." It felt like a slap to the face, but I brushed it off, thinking it was just another one of those offhand comments that she didn't really mean. But deep down, something shifted in me. The seed of doubt was planted and I couldn't shake it. I told myself, maybe she's right, and kept quiet, not realizing that was the beginning of my downfall. She had a way of making me feel like I wasn't good enough, and I let it happen without questioning it. The more time passed, the harder it became to ignore the growing tension between us. I'd get home from work, exhausted from my day, and there she'd be, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, the glow from the screen illuminating her face. She'd look up at me, but instead of the warm smile I used to get, there was this coldness, like I was somehow beneath her. It wasn't just the offhand comments anymore, it was the way she looked at me, the way she spoke. Everything felt like a reminder of how much she thought she was worth compared to me. One evening, as we sat at dinner, Sarah brought up a recent promotion she'd gotten at work. She was beaming, proud of herself, and I tried to be happy for her, but something about the way she talked about it left a sour taste in my mouth. "I deserve this," she said, her eyes glinting with pride. "I've worked so hard and finally things are falling into place. I mean, I'm just glad I'm not stuck like some people." She didn't even look at me when she said it, but I felt it, the sting of her words cutting deeper than I cared to admit. I tried to play it off, tried to tell myself that it wasn't meant for me, that she was just talking about her coworkers or the people she had to deal with in her job. But I knew the truth. She was talking about me. It was impossible to ignore anymore. The distance between us wasn't just physical, it was emotional, and I couldn't bridge it. Every time I tried to open up, to talk about my struggles, she'd change the subject or give me that condescending smile that made me feel like a failure. But it wasn't until a few weeks later that the real shift happened. We were lying in bed, the quiet of the night surrounding us, and Sarah turned to me with a coldness I hadn't seen before. "I don't think you're ever going to make it, you know," she said, her voice almost too calm. "You'll never get anyone better than me. So you better appreciate what you have because people like me don't stick around forever." It hit me like a punch to the gut. I froze, not knowing how to respond. She wasn't just criticizing me anymore. She was making sure I knew she was the best I'd ever have. And I just lay there, unsure of how to fight back or even if I should. I told myself I'd let it go, but her words echoed in my mind, repeating over and over again. Deep down, I knew that something had changed, but I wasn't ready to face it yet. The next few weeks felt like I was living in a fog, caught between the person I thought I knew and the one who had started to unravel before me. Sarah's presence in the house felt more like a weight than a comfort, and I couldn't ignore the growing resentment between us. Her words lingered in the air, suffocating the space between us, and no matter how hard I tried to move past them, I couldn't. Every time I looked at her, I couldn't shake the feeling that she saw me as less successful, less worthy. I started to withdraw into myself, avoiding conversations where I might have to explain why I hadn't hit the milestone she thought I should have by now. I didn't have the confidence to confront her, didn't know how to break through the barriers she had put up. I was beginning to question myself, wondering if I was really as much of a failure as she seemed to think I was. But then came the day that changed everything. I was at work, trying to focus on a project that had been hanging over my head for weeks. My phone buzzed, and when I looked at the screen, I saw a message from Sarah. My heart sank before I even opened it. It was brief, almost too casual. "I think we need to talk when you get home." I knew what that meant. The dread that washed over me was instant. This wasn't going to be one of those conversations where we'd talk about our plans or our future. This was her stepping out of the role of my partner and into the role of someone who had already decided that I wasn't enough. When I walked through the door that night, I could already feel the tension in the air, thick like a storm cloud ready to burst. Sarah was sitting at the kitchen table, her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "I've been thinking," she started, her voice colder than usual. "And I don't think we're right for each other anymore. I need someone who's going places. I can't keep waiting around for you to figure things out." I felt my breath catch in my chest, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean? We've been together for 4 years. You can't just—" "I can," she interrupted, her voice sharp. "You're not going to change. You're not ambitious enough for me. I need more. I deserve more." The words stung. But what hit hardest wasn't her harsh tone. It was the finality in her eyes. She was already done with me. She didn't even seem to care that I was still standing there trying to process what she had just thrown at me. For a moment, I just stood there, feeling completely numb. I wanted to argue, to beg her to stay, but I knew deep down it wouldn't matter. She had already made up her mind, and in that moment, something inside me shifted. The sadness, the anger, the helplessness, it all swirled together. But more than anything, I felt humiliated. She had just made it clear that everything I had worked for, everything I had hoped we could build, meant nothing to her. I didn't even recognize the person who was sitting across from me anymore. "Fine," I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. "If that's what you want, then go." And just like that, she did. She left without another word. The door slammed behind her, and the weight of her absence hung in the air like a bitter aftertaste. I stood there, frozen, as the silence took over the house. The worst part? I wasn't even sure if I was relieved or broken. The next few days felt like I was drifting in some kind of purgatory. I moved through life mechanically, unable to find any real sense of purpose or direction. My world had been flipped upside down, and I was too numb to fully process it. I went to work, came home, and just sat in silence. The apartment, once full of her presence, now felt empty. Her perfume lingered on the pillows, and the faint imprint of her being was still visible in places I couldn't escape. I wasn't even sure when the tears started. It wasn't immediate. It came in waves, those quiet, brutal moments when I'd be alone in my car or in the middle of a work project, and I'd feel it hit me like a tidal wave. The pain of knowing that I wasn't enough for her, the woman I thought I would spend my life with, was suffocating. It wasn't just that she left. It was that she made it clear she didn't see any value in me. She had walked away from me as if I was disposable, nothing more than a stepping stone in her path to something, or someone, better. And the worst part, she was right. I hadn't made the moves she had expected me to. I hadn't reached the levels of success she had, and now it felt like I was paying the price for it. I started questioning everything about myself, my worth, my future, my ability to ever be happy again. Was I destined to always be the one left behind, the one who never made it in the eyes of people who mattered? It was on one of those days when I was staring blankly at my phone that something caught my eye. A notification from Facebook. Sarah had posted a picture, a selfie of her and some guy I didn't recognize, with a caption that made my heart drop. "Found someone who gets me," it said. My chest tightened and my hands went cold. The person in the picture was clearly into her, and from the way she was smiling I could tell she was already moving on. I felt something shift in me, a cold, bitter kind of clarity. It wasn't just that she had moved on, it was that she had moved on so easily, I had loved her, I had given everything I had to make her happy, and in return she had walked away without a second thought. I was nothing to her now, but something else sparked within me. Anger. Maybe it was the betrayal, or maybe it was the realization that I had been so blind, but a fire started burning in my chest. I had been stuck in this self-pitying spiral for far too long. I wasn't just going to let her walk away from me. I wasn't going to stay the same guy I had been, the guy who let someone tear him down and walk all over him. As much as it hurt, I knew this was my turning point. I was done being the guy she walked away from. I wasn't going to let her win. The plan started to form in my mind, slowly but surely. I wasn't going to get her back. No, but I was going to show her what she had left behind. I was going to take control of my life and make sure she saw the person I was becoming. I'd show her, and everyone else, that I was better than she'd ever given me credit for. And maybe, just maybe, she'd regret ever saying those words. I spent the next few weeks in a haze of anger and determination. I wasn't going to let the feeling of being worthless consume me anymore. Every time the thought crossed my mind, I shoved it aside and focused on the bigger picture, getting myself back on track, getting stronger. I started working extra hours at my job, diving into new projects, pushing myself to the limit. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I was doing it for me. But even with all the work, I still couldn't shake the memory of Sarah. Every time I passed a restaurant we used to go to, or saw her favorite brand of shampoo on sale, I felt that sharp sting. I would get lost in thought, wondering where she was, what she was doing, if she was really happy with that new guy. My mind tortured me with images of them together, laughing, holding hands, everything I'd once thought was ours. And that's when I realized. The anger was no longer just about her leaving. It was about me letting her take away my peace, my confidence, my self-worth. Every time I let her take up space in my head, I was giving her power I didn't owe her. That was when the idea hit me. What if I took back that power? What if I started living the life I should have been living all along? But it wasn't going to be just about getting better for myself. It was going to be about showing her exactly what she lost. And the opportunity presented itself in a way I never could have predicted. I had been working hard on my side business for the last few months, a small retail store I had started from scratch. It was nothing huge, but it was mine. I had poured every ounce of my energy into it, hoping it would take off, and finally, it did. After months of struggle, I had grown it enough to expand, and that's when the thought crossed my mind. What if I made Sarah pay for what she did? I wasn't going to stalk her or beg her to come back. I wasn't going to make a scene. I wasn't that desperate. But I could do something much more satisfying. I could take the life she thought she could leave me for, and turn it into something she'd never see coming. I called up my business partner and made the decision to hire new staff, and then I had the idea. I needed someone to work a low-level position at my store, someone reliable, but someone I wouldn't need to keep around for long, someone who could really understand what it meant to get the worst shifts, to be given the least respect. I decided to hire her. It wasn't just about getting revenge. It was about making her feel the weight of what she had done to me, to remind her that the stability and success she thought she was entitled to couldn't be handed to her. When Sarah walked into the store for the interview, I almost didn't recognize her at first. She looked exactly the same, but something about her was different. Maybe it was the fact that she thought she was walking back into my life, or maybe it was the look of surprise when she saw me behind the counter, acting as if everything had been normal. She didn't know it yet, but this was only the beginning. The interview was awkward, to say the least. Sarah stood in front of me, her usual confidence replaced by a nervous energy I hadn't seen before. I could see the flicker of realization in her eyes as she processed where she was. My store. But she quickly masked it with a forced smile, pretending everything was fine, as if she had been unaffected by the way she had left me. So, tell me more about the position? She asked, her voice shaky but still trying to sound professional. She clearly hadn't expected to be here, and it was hard to hide the discomfort in her voice. But she pressed on, hoping she could at least salvage some dignity from this situation. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms across my chest. Well, we're looking for someone who can handle the basics: stocking, cashier duties, customer service. It's an entry-level job, but I think you'll find it's a good environment to grow in, if you're willing to put in the work." Her eyes narrowed slightly. I could tell she wasn't buying it. She had expected to walk in here, give a few smiles, and be handed a job. After all, that's what she had come to expect from people in her life. Everything handed to her with little effort. But this wasn't going to be like that. "Right," she said, but her tone lacked the usual arrogance I was used to. There was something else beneath it now, a hint of vulnerability that she wasn't even trying to hide. I could see her mind racing as she realized I wasn't offering her anything special. She must have been thinking, "This is what you're giving me." But it wasn't just the position. It was the realization that this wasn't the kind of job she could show off to her friends, the kind of job that made her feel superior. This was real work, the kind she had always dismissed. "Well, I'm sure I can handle it," she replied, though it lacked the certainty I'd heard from her before. She shifted on her feet, clearly uncomfortable in this new reality where she was the one applying for a job rather than getting handpicked for the best opportunities. I looked her over one last time before speaking, leaning forward slightly. "Great, you can start tomorrow. I'll have the manager show you the ropes." I could see the realization hit her like a wave. She had expected a cushy desk job or a managerial position, something to validate her. But instead, she was here, sitting across from me in an entry-level role that I could tell she thought was beneath her. As the interview ended, she stood up, trying to keep up the appearance of someone who wasn't shaken. "I'll see you tomorrow then," she said, her voice clipped. "See you tomorrow," I replied, watching her leave with a strange mixture of emotions. A small part of me felt satisfaction, maybe even pride, that I was finally taking control of the narrative. She had walked all over me for so long, but now it was my turn to make the rules. As the door shut behind her, I sat there for a moment, letting the silence settle. I knew this wasn't over yet. I wasn't going to let her off that easily. Every day she worked at my store, I would make her feel the sting of what she had left behind. Her words, her choices, and the person she thought she could walk away from. But I wasn't just doing this to make her feel bad. I was doing it to prove a point to myself, that I didn't need her, that I could rise above her shallow expectations, that I could become the person I was always meant to be, with or without her approval. The hardest part was still coming, the part where she would realize that what she thought she had left behind wasn't gone at all. It was staring her right in the face, every single day. The next few days dragged on, but they felt like a weird sort of turning point. Sarah started work at my store and I kept my distance. I didn't want her to think for a second that I was being soft on her, that I cared enough to make her feel comfortable. No, I wanted her to understand that this wasn't just about the job. This was about her losing her place in my life, about me taking back the control I had let slip away. The first shift was quiet, too quiet. I stayed in the back, watching her from the security cameras, not because I wanted to spy, but because I was almost afraid of what might happen if she noticed me watching her. I had to see if she would sink or swim, if she'd somehow pull her usual tricks to charm people into thinking she was something special. By the end of her shift, it was clear she wasn't used to this kind of work. She fumbled with the register, got frustrated with the tasks, and even snapped at a customer for asking a simple question about a product. I couldn't help but notice how out of place she looked, how uncomfortable she was. She wasn't in control anymore. She wasn't the boss anymore. But that wasn't the worst of it. The real shift came a week later when I finally walked out onto the sales floor to check on how things were going. I knew it was time to see how she was handling the pressure, but I didn't expect what happened next. As soon as she saw me, she froze, her face flushing a deep shade of red. For a split second, there was a flash of something in her eyes. Fear, maybe, or embarrassment. It was the same look I'd seen in her so many times over the years when she knew she had been caught in a lie, when she realized she couldn't charm her way out of a situation. "Everything going all right?" I asked casually, walking up to her with a small, almost amused smile. I wanted her to feel small, to know she wasn't going to win me over with any fake charm or sweet talk. "Yeah," she replied too quickly, trying to sound casual. "Just a little busy, you know?" "I saw that," I said, glancing at the piles of receipts and inventory sheets scattered on the counter. "You're not quite hitting the numbers I expected. I hope you can do better tomorrow." Her jaw tightened at the comment, but she didn't argue. She couldn't. The role reversal was obvious. She was no longer the one calling the shots. I had no interest in making her feel comfortable. She had used me for so long. Now it was my turn to make her feel the weight of her actions. As I turned to leave, I heard her voice, softer than usual, calling after me. "You really think this is fair?" I paused at the door, not turning to look at her immediately. "Fair?" I repeated, my tone colder than I intended. "You think it's fair that I spent years of my life with someone who constantly told me I wasn't enough? You think it's fair that you walked out on me like I didn't matter?" I turned to face her now, my eyes locking onto hers, and for the first time in a long while I saw a flicker of regret in her eyes. "Yeah," I continued, voice steady. "It's fair. You had your chance to make things right. But now, you're just going to have to live with the consequences of your actions." I could see the anger rising in her, but this time, I wasn't intimidated. She wanted to shout at me to make me feel bad, but she couldn't. This wasn't the same relationship. She didn't have any power over me anymore. I walked out of the store, leaving her standing there, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I knew this wasn't the end. I wasn't just going to let her stew in regret and embarrassment forever, but I was going to make sure she knew one thing. There were no second chances for her, not with me, not anymore. And as I left, part of me almost felt a little lighter. Maybe this was what I needed. Maybe I didn't need her approval to be enough. Maybe I just needed to prove it to myself. The weeks that followed felt like a game of silent chess. Each move calculated, every encounter loaded with meaning. Sarah worked her shifts at the store, and I made sure to keep a careful distance. Enough to make her realize I wasn't someone she could easily manipulate anymore, but close enough to watch the cracks begin to show in her carefully constructed armor. I could see the toll it was taking on her. She wasn't the polished, confident woman who had walked out on me. Instead, she was a shell of that person, exhausted, visibly frustrated, and no longer able to command the same level of respect she used to. Customers who once would have kissed up to her now avoided her, and her co-workers, who had always respected her as the ambitious, successful one, now treated her like just another employee. I watched her slowly unravel, but there was one moment, one shift, when everything came to a head. It was a Tuesday afternoon, a day that started off like any other. The store was busy, and I was in the back sorting through inventory when I overheard Sarah on the sales floor. Her voice was shaky, but I could hear the desperation in it. She was talking to a customer who was complaining about a product, and she was doing her best to placate him. I could tell she was struggling to maintain her composure, but then something snapped. "Listen," she said, louder than I had expected, her voice rising with frustration. "If you don't like it, then don't buy it. I'm not here to beg you to take our products. I'm just doing my job." The customer looked taken aback, and I could see a few other people turn to watch the interaction. The silence that followed was heavy, like everyone had paused to see what would happen next. It wasn't just the outburst that caught people off guard. It was the way Sarah had no control over the situation anymore, how she couldn't charm her way out of an uncomfortable moment, how powerless she seemed. I stepped onto the sales floor and approached them, my footsteps deliberate but calm. I saw the way Sarah's face flushed when she realized I was watching. She quickly recovered, though, her posture straightening as if trying to salvage whatever dignity she had left. "Everything all right here?" I asked, my tone cool, but with just enough edge to make her aware of my presence. Sarah's eyes darted to me, and for a split second, I saw her as vulnerable. More vulnerable than I had ever seen her before. She tried to smile, but it was tight, forced. "Yeah, just a misunderstanding," she said, voice faltering. The customer, still a bit confused, nodded and walked away. But I could tell he was already judging her, and Sarah knew it. Her face was flushed, her hands shaking slightly. I waited until the floor was clear before I spoke again, my voice low but direct. "You can't keep letting your emotions run the show, Sarah," I said. "This job isn't about you being in charge. It's about showing up, doing your best, and earning the respect of those around you." Something you never learned to do with me." Her eyes hardened at the mention of our past. "You think this is about me trying to prove something to you?" She snapped. "I'm not here to prove anything. I'm just trying to survive." I could feel the shift in her words. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about the cracks in her carefully curated identity, the one she had built on being the successful one. She was no longer that person. She was broken, and I had a front-row seat to her unraveling. I leaned against the counter, looking at her but not with sympathy. "I wasn't here to coddle her. Survival isn't enough. You wanted to be more than that. You wanted to make me feel small, like I was never good enough for you. But I'm not that guy anymore. I'm stronger now, Sarah, and you're the one who's struggling." The words hit her hard. She looked away, unable to meet my gaze. I could see the tears threatening to spill, but she quickly wiped them away, trying to maintain some semblance of control. "Maybe I deserve this," she whispered, more to herself than to me. Her voice was so small, so unlike the woman I had known. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of the person she had once been. The girl I had loved. The girl I thought could never hurt me. But that wasn't who she was anymore. She had broken something inside me, and I had rebuilt myself from the ground up. She couldn't break me again. I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, I paused. "You'll be all right, Sarah. You'll learn. But don't expect me to be here to pick up the pieces this time." I could feel her eyes on me as I walked out of the store, the weight of everything that had happened between us hanging in the air. It wasn't over, not yet. But I had done what I needed to do. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. The days after that encounter felt like I was walking on a different kind of earth, one that was solid beneath my feet, grounded in a way I hadn't felt in years. Sarah's reaction to what I'd said echoed in my mind for days. I'd seen a side of her that I had almost forgotten existed. Vulnerable, regretful, defeated. But it didn't change anything. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. I kept my distance at work, watching her struggle with the simplest tasks. Every time I passed by the sales floor, I saw her trying to hold it together, but the cracks were starting to widen. She was always trying to be in control, trying to fix things that were already broken, and it was wearing on her. I couldn't help but feel a little bit of satisfaction watching her unravel. But then it happened. The moment I hadn't expected. Sarah came into the office one evening after her shift, holding a letter in her hand. Her face was pale, her expression tight, and for the first time since she had walked out on me, she looked genuinely scared. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, her voice small. I looked up from my desk, surprised. I had expected her to eventually come to me with some excuse, some way to try to regain control, but this wasn't what I had imagined. "What's going on?" I asked, setting down the papers I was working on. I could feel my heart rate pick up, but I didn't show it. I wasn't going to let her see me sweat. She didn't say anything at first. She just handed me the letter. I took it from her hand, my fingers brushing hers for a moment. It was strange. This was a woman I had loved once, who now felt like a stranger. The letter was from the store's main office, and I could tell immediately it was serious by the tone of the text. It was a formal warning about her performance, citing multiple customer complaints and errors in her work. The letter was clear. If things didn't improve, she'd be let go. I looked up at her, and she stood there, eyes filled with both frustration and fear. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I can't do this anymore. I thought I could, but I can't." I paused, letting the silence stretch between us. For a moment I considered giving her a speech, offering some form of sympathy. But the truth was, I didn't feel bad for her anymore. The empathy I once had for her had been eroded over time, worn down by the harsh words she had said, the manipulation she had used to make me feel small. "So, what do you want me to do?" I asked finally. My voice was even, controlled. "Do you want me to fix this for you? Do you want me to call in a favor?" She shook her head, tears threatening to fall. "No," she whispered, I need to know I'm not completely worthless." I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to say something, tell her she could turn things around, that she still had a chance. But the other part of me, the one that had been hurt by her so many times, felt something different. I took a deep breath and placed the letter down on the desk. Sarah, I can't fix this for you. You've had every opportunity to prove yourself, and you chose to leave. I'm not your backup plan anymore. I'm not here to make you feel better about the mess you made. She flinched at my words, but I didn't regret saying them. For so long, I had allowed her to treat me like a second choice, like someone who existed just to pick up the pieces of her mistakes. Not anymore. I stood up and walked toward the door, my body feeling lighter than it had in months. I didn't look back as I spoke. You'll figure it out. But don't expect me to be there to save you this time. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and I walked out of the office, leaving her standing there, alone. I didn't know what she would do next, but I knew one thing for sure. I was done. I had given everything to her once. Now it was my turn to take back control of my life. I wasn't just moving on. I was finally free. The next few days felt like a strange kind of silence had settled over everything. My store ran like a well-oiled machine, and Sarah's absence from the office and the floor was noticeable, but it wasn't the chaos I had expected. I hadn't heard from her since that night she handed me the letter, and I wasn't sure if she had quit, if she was too embarrassed to show up, or if she was just trying to figure out what to do next. But whatever it was, I knew this chapter of our story was over. But then, as I was wrapping up work one evening, I got a text. The screen of my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. "Can we talk? I need to explain." I stared at the words for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard, fighting the impulse to respond immediately. The old me, the one who had put up with all of her manipulative behaviors, would have been eager to engage, to hear her side, to feel needed by her again. But the new me, the one who had rebuilt himself and learned the hard lessons, wasn't interested in any of that. Still, curiosity gnawed at me. I had no idea what she could possibly want to explain after everything had played out. But part of me felt like there was something unfinished in the air between us, something that needed to be said, even if I didn't owe her anything. I finally typed back, not sure if I wanted closure or just the satisfaction of knowing she had to face me. "Fine. What is it?" She replied almost immediately, "I'm outside. Can we meet?" For a second, I hesitated. A part of me wanted to say no, to end it here and move on without giving her any more of my time or energy. But I knew there was one last thing that I needed to do, to see if she had learned anything at all from the consequences of her actions. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The air outside was cold, and the city streets felt emptier than usual, as if the world was holding its breath. When I arrived at the spot she mentioned, I saw her standing by the corner, looking smaller than I had ever seen her. Her posture was different, slumped, like she no longer had the strength to maintain the image she once projected. She looked up when I approached, her eyes a little swollen, red from crying. But there was something else there, something raw. I wasn't sure if it was regret or fear, but I could see that she was barely holding it together. She started, but then paused, her lips trembling as she gathered her thoughts. "I'm sorry for everything. For how I treated you. For everything I said. For all the ways I made you feel like you weren't enough. I didn't realize how much I hurt you until now. I thought I could just walk away and find someone better. But I was wrong. I see that now." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I wasn't sure how to respond. There was a part of me that wanted to hear the apology, to hear her acknowledge everything she had put me through. But at the same time, there was another part of me that knew that hearing it wouldn't change anything. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," she continued, "but I just need you to know that I see how much I've hurt you. I'm sorry for that." I looked at her for a long moment, letting the weight of her words settle. She had apologized, but there was something so hollow about it, something that didn't feel like it came from a place of genuine understanding. It felt rehearsed, like she was just saying what she thought I needed to hear to let her off the hook. "Sarah," I finally said, my voice steady but distant. "I appreciate the apology, but it's too little too late. I'm not the same person I was when we were together. I'm not the guy who's going to let you come back and hurt me again. I've moved on. And you should, too." She looked like she was about to say something more, but I could see the tears threatening to spill over, and that was when I knew I had made the right decision. I wasn't going to let her manipulate me back into her world. Not now. Not ever again. I turned to leave, but before I walked away, I gave her one last glance. "You'll figure it out," I said, the words hanging in the cool air. "But you're not part of my life anymore. And that's the way it's going to stay." With that, I walked away, my heart a little lighter, knowing that I had taken control of my life. That was the last time I would ever look back. The chapter was over, and it was finally time for me to write my own story. The days after that meeting with Sarah felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders, but it wasn't immediate peace. It was more like the calm after a storm, a quiet that wasn't yet comfortable, but it was settling in. I found myself thinking about the past more often than I wanted to admit, replaying moments with Sarah, the good and the bad. But slowly, the sting of it all started to fade, and with it came a strange sense of clarity. I started taking better care of myself, doing the things I'd neglected while I was caught up in trying to fix something that wasn't mine to fix. I hit the gym more, ate healthier, and spent time with friends who actually cared about me. I focused on building my business and expanding it. Every success, no matter how small, felt like a victory. I was finally building the life I had wanted, without the cloud of Sarah's expectations hanging over me. But, of course, life doesn't just let you walk away unscathed. Sarah's presence still lingered in my mind occasionally, and every now and then I'd hear rumors or run into someone who knew her. They'd ask how I was doing, and I'd give the usual "I'm good" answer, but I couldn't help but notice the pity in their eyes. People knew what had happened. They knew the story of the guy who had been left behind, and it seemed like they still saw me as that guy. That's when the temptation to reach out, to somehow prove to everyone, especially to myself, that I wasn't defined by what Sarah did, started creeping in. It was tempting to rub my success in her face, to show her what she'd lost, but I knew better. I wasn't doing this for her. I was doing this for me. Then, about a month later, I ran into her again. It was completely unplanned. I was out with some friends at a local bar, and as I was walking toward the entrance, I saw her. She was sitting at a table near the back with a guy, laughing, drinking, looking more put together than I'd ever seen her in a long time. For a second, I almost didn't recognize her. She had a new energy, this aura of confidence, like she had finally found herself after everything. But as soon as she saw me, that confident facade faltered and I caught her eyes. The awkwardness between us was palpable. She didn't stand up or wave. She didn't say anything, just stared for a moment, almost waiting for me to react. I didn't. I kept walking, passing by her table as though she was just another face in the crowd. She called my name softly, almost like an afterthought, but I didn't stop. "Hey," she said, voice almost too quiet for anyone else to hear. "How have you been?" I turned slightly, but I didn't face her completely. "I'm good," I said, keeping my tone neutral. I didn't want to be rude, but I also wasn't about to open the door for some emotional conversation that was too little, too late. I watched her face tighten as I continued walking past her. For a moment, I felt that old feeling rise up, the urge to feel sorry for her, to somehow let her back into my life. But I resisted it. I couldn't go backward, not when I had come so far. I was better than that. I didn't look back, and that was the last time I saw Sarah. The next few days were peaceful, and that uncomfortable tension that had lingered between us, between me and the life we had shared, finally faded away. I was no longer angry. I didn't need her apology, her validation, or her approval. What I had built for myself was enough. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't even about proving anything to her. It was about the man I was becoming, the one who could walk away from the past, from the heartbreak and the manipulation, and never look back. I was finally free. And the best part? I had done it all on my own. As the weeks passed, I began to feel a new kind of peace, a calm that had been so hard to find before. The air felt lighter, the weight of the past slipping off my shoulders. I no longer had to carry Sarah's expectations, her words, or her manipulations. I could breathe without that constant pressure. For the first time in years, I truly felt like I was in control of my life. I spent more time with the people who genuinely cared about me, people who hadn't judged me or made me feel inferior. I reconnected with friends I hadn't seen in months, some of them even telling me how much they had noticed the change in me. They saw it too. I wasn't the same person who had walked around in the shadows of someone else's doubts. I was becoming the man I always knew I could be. And that felt powerful. I poured everything into my business. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about proving to myself that I could build something from the ground up, without anyone else's approval, without anyone else's validation. The store thrived, and with every success I felt stronger. I was finally in a place where I was proud of my accomplishments, not because of anyone else's standards, but because I had earned it on my own terms. There was a quiet satisfaction that came with knowing I had come this far. I didn't need to rub it in anyone's face. I didn't need to show Sarah what she had lost. It wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about healing, about finding the strength to stand on my own and be proud of the person I had become. But even with all that progress, there were still moments when my mind would wander, when I'd wonder if she ever thought about me, about us. But those moments were fleeting. The pain of losing her had dulled, and I realized that it wasn't the loss of her that hurt the most. It was the loss of myself. But I had found myself again. I had rebuilt piece by piece, and now I was standing tall, unbroken. And then, one night, a text came through. It was from a number I didn't recognize at first. But when I opened it, my heart skipped. It was Sarah. "Hey," it said. "I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to say that I've been thinking about you. I know I hurt you, and I regret how I treated you. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to respond, to say something, anything. But then I realized the apology didn't matter anymore. It didn't change the fact that I had moved on, that I had built something better for myself, that I had finally let go of the past. I could feel the old patterns of wanting closure, of wanting to hear the words I had hoped for so long, but I knew better now. I had closed that chapter. I had written my own ending, one that didn't require her validation, one that didn't rely on anything but my own growth and healing. I didn't respond. I let the message sit there, unread, before I deleted it. And that was it. That was the final piece of closure I needed. I wasn't waiting for her to apologize or for her to see what she had done. I had already forgiven myself for letting her hurt me, for staying when I should have walked away long before. The story was over. The hurt was gone, and I was finally, truly free. It wasn't the end I had expected, but it was the one I needed, and for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace with that.